It's a sunny day and we are at the beach. You can tell it's a fight week here in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. Ariel Helwan is not here, so I have my man Brian Stann with me to break down all the action before the UFC 212 Aldo against Holloway for the UFC Featherweight Championship. So it's a big card here in Brazil. Yeah. There's not a lot of stars, but there are a lot of interesting matchups. So starting in the prelims, the main event of the prelims is Rafael Assunção and Marlon Moraes. It's a fantastic matchup. What are your thoughts on this, and what do you expect from Marlon in his UFC debut?
Well, you know, Marlon Moraes obviously has had a tremendous run, and he's been very confident this week. He had a tremendous weight cut. I mean, when he was on stage today after the weight cut, getting to bantamweight, he's smiling, he's talking, so he appears to be in phenomenal shape. This is dangerous, you know, for Assunção, because Moraes is taking this. This is his Super Bowl. This is his championship fight. This is his introduction to the UFC. He's a busy fighter. When you watch him fight, you're going to see a blend of Frankie Edgar, and you're going to see a blend of Edson Barbosa, because Marlon Moraes has trained under the same kickboxing coach side by side with Edson Barbosa for his entire career. So there's a lot of similarities there, but now you see more of a mix, a blend of Mark Henry, some blended boxing with his wrestling. He fights at a high pace and a very high output. The total opposite, Rafael Assunção, is a low-volume, counter-striking guy with big power, excellent submissions, and he's also a very good counter-wrestler and very good scrambler. So it's a real opposite here, and sometimes when Assunção fights other counter-strikers like Aljamain Sterling, it's a little bit of a slower-paced fight. But when he fights more aggressive guys like Marlon Moraes, that sometimes brings out the best in him. And so for Marlon, he's got to stay busy. He's got to wear him down. He's got to beat him with volume, overcome him with combinations, add in the takedowns. I think he's really going to struggle to take Assunção down, but he should beat him with combinations and being the busier guy, because Assunção doesn't throw that often. When he throws, he makes it count, and that's the danger for Assunção. Assunção cannot do this whole fight playing the matador. He's got to be the bull sometimes. He's got to switch it up. He's got to be offensive. He's got to be a counter striker, but he has to land. He can't land 1 or 2 strikes a minute against a guy who puts this kind of volume, because he'll lose the fight just based on volume alone. And this is going to be a fight where I don't necessarily see a finish materializing. They're very evenly matched, but it's either going to be the volume of Marlon Moraes, or can Assunção hurt him and really make him hesitant to want to go in the pocket because of his sneaky counters. Yeah.
Marlon Moraes is coming off a long win streak, but Assunção has fought better competition in the UFC. But Marlon Moraes is the favorite according to the odds maker. Yeah. Are you surprised with that?
I'm not really surprised by it, because I think, you know, where Marlon Moraes hasn't obviously fought the top echelon fighters, they understand who he's been training with and that he's training every day out of a top echelon camp. And if he's the main guy Frankie Edgar and Eddie Alvarez are using for their big fights, he's obviously an elite level fighter. And I think what they're looking at is they're just looking at a guy who, just based on the numbers, throws more often than Assunção. When Rafael Assunção loses, it's typically more that he loses the fight rather than the other guy beats him. He allows the other guys to seize the initiative. He gets a little lazy, a little too methodical, looking for the perfect counter. He's got to be busier. And if he is busier, this could be a tough fight, because one of the things about Rafael Assunção, the way he counter strikes, the way he sets traps and tricks you, he throws at really odd angles, and he's much more powerful a striker than people give him credit for. You know, when you saw the first time he fought TJ Dillashaw, he rocked him multiple times. So that should be a really interesting fight. What's going on? Look, Eric Spicy, if you're gonna come in here, come on. You gotta come in here and make a cameo on MMA Fighting.
How you doing?
I'm doing all right, man. How you doing?
How you doing?
You coming in, Jamie, or what? You gonna come say hi? Like, this is what happens. We do early morning weigh-ins. They're all hanging out, having fun. Then they'll go on stage and put on the show.
So I heard you have a lot of another fighter fighting the prelims that you're looking most forward to.
Yeah, you know, Luan Chagas versus Jim Wallhead, I just think it's a fun clash of styles, right? I mean, they're both guys who are very aggressive, eager to go out there, and I think, you know, Chagas looked fantastic against Eric Silva in his last fight. Yeah. He just ran out of gas, and that happens, right? When you're young and you're not used to being in that octagon, it's a big deal, the event gets big, the crowd steals your energy. And when you're looking to finish, I mean, he hurt Eric Silva multiple times, went for the finish, it just didn't.
Fractured his face.
Yeah, it didn't control himself, and he fractured his face in the first round.
Yeah.
First round, fractured his face and kept going. So I think Chagas, he could be an exciting guy. I'm really interested to see what he has. And Jim Wallhead is the kind of guy that man, if you don't have a gas tank, if you're not bringing it against him, he could overtake the fight in the later round.
Yeah, in the main card, there's an interesting one. Paulo Borrachinha, he only has one fight in the UFC, lasted 77 seconds, and he's fighting Holloway Bush. What are your thoughts on this fight? It's an interesting one, especially being the main card on a pay-per-view, but shows how high the UFC has on Borrachinha.
Well, look, when you watch Paulo Borrachinha's early fights here in Brazil, he's a wrecking machine. I mean, he destroys everybody they put in front of him. The big question is, okay, how does that translate when you're fighting good guys? He took on his debut a tough guy in Gareth McClellan. Gareth McClellan's no slouch. He's no chump. And Paulo Borrachinha put hands on him, and for a big, strong, physical specimen, he throws with speed. That's not an easy thing to do. A lot of times younger fighters, only 10 fights, you know, they tend to tense up when they want to throw with power, and they don't throw fast. They get sloppy with their defense. Not the case. He's very technical, has good jiu-jitsu. The difference here, though, when I look at the body of work Paulo Borrachinha's done, both in the UFC and before that, he fought a lot of guys who were very stationary, who stood in front of him. They were smaller octagons in some of those fights. Holloway Bush, he's a really good athlete, a surprising athlete, and he's all over the place. When you talk to him, his mind works at 100 miles an hour. His fight game's all over the place as well. He throws at different angles. This is a fight where if Paulo Borrachinha isn't more patient, we're going to really see his footwork. Can he cut him off? Can he set him up? How good is he in the clinch? And how does he deal with a middleweight that's faster than him? Holloway's a small middleweight. He could probably try and get to 170. He chooses to fight at 185 because he brings power. His kicks are very powerful, but he's very, very quick. And so two guys who could be, you know, guys that could enter in the top 15. When I talked to Paulo Borrachinha this week, he told me he's ready right now to take on top 10 guys in middleweight. Interesting comment. He's obviously very confident. Fighting here in Brazil, he's got a lot of advantages going for him in this fight.
Yeah, and also at 185 is an important fight. Vitor Belfort, he's taking on Nate Marquardt, two veterans of the sport. How do you see this style of fights? Nate's compared to Vitor's last opponents, he's a little down in the rankings, but it's still a dangerous fight for him.
Well, it's always, I mean, Nate Marquardt is a stud. I mean, in terms of MMA experience and technique, he can do it all, right? The guys who've been beating him recently, it's if they catch him, right? He's an aging fighter, and as we get older in this sport, we can't take the shots as well. And so that's the real question for Nate Marquardt. Nate Marquardt can do it all. They're both a little bit chinny, but I think for Marquardt, he's not bringing the same firepower in the striking department in this fight. I think he should focus on the clinch, trying to wear down Vitor. In the past several fights for Vitor, if he's put on the ground, we've seen him get into trouble with really high-level grapplers. But he's only fighting the best dudes. I mean, his last fight was against Kelvin Gastelum. He's fighting really tough guys. And in all those fights, in the early going, the hand speed is still there. Against Mousasi, against Kelvin Gastelum, Vitor Belfort's hand speed is still there. He seems really, really rejuvenated mentally, training at TriStar. Under Firas Zahabi, I think he learned some new things. And Firas is really good about making guys a little bit more methodical and patient. So let's see how that blends with Vitor, you know? I will tell you this. It was a really cool comment when I talked to Nate Marquardt last week, and he said to me, you know, he goes, Vitor's still extremely dangerous. Look, Vitor fights with a lot of risk. It's why he gets all these highlight reel knockouts. He is going to go for a finish. And when you do that, you take a big risk, and you can get finished yourself. And he put it perfectly. He said, that's what makes Vitor Vitor. Vitor will take risks, and he's going to finish guys, or he may get finished. But either way, you know he's going to go for that, and he's going to take those risks. And Nate Marquardt had a lot of respect for him.
Vitor in March, he lost to Kelvin Gastelum, and then after right after the fight, he said he wanted to fight the last fight of his contract with the UFC because his body couldn't take it anymore. Being a former fighter, when a fighter says that and now comes back and say he has fire in him, fire back in him, and he wants to continue fighting, maybe fight more than one fight. How tough is to handle this stage in your career to announce your body can't take it anymore, but then you change your mind, you continue fighting. How tough it is to make this decision to stop fighting?
It's so hard. I mean, even now, I'm 36. I've been retired for a long time. I have to fight the urge to want to come back. I mean, you're never going to experience for the rest of your life the feeling of walking out of that tunnel. And when your hand gets raised, it's such hard work for 2 months. All you're thinking about is this opponent. And when your hand gets raised, it's the most unique feeling in the world. And I mean, for the next several weeks, you're on cloud 9. You know, your water tastes better. You know, you kiss your wife, it feels better. You see your family, everything's better, you know? It's a hard thing to walk away from. And look, people know, and I say this with all the respect in the world, I tend to lean on the safe side. And there's a lot of guys, I mean, in both these guys, Nate Marquardt and Vitor Belfort, if I'm coaching them, I ask them, hey, look, let's make this the last one. Just because I've seen from my military background, seeing football players, seeing fighters, we know there's consequences to doing this too long. And there's a lot more life to live post-MMA. And it's not just about living that life, right? It's the quality of that life. And guess what? The most important thing about that is your brain. And so Vitor's done a tremendous amount for the sport. Nate Marquardt's done I mean, they're both far better fighters than I could have ever hoped to be, right? They're great family, and they've got beautiful families. They've got nothing left to prove. So if they're thinking about that, then hey, go put on a great performance tomorrow and then ride off in the sunset. They're bright people. They can do other things. I'm not the person to tell them to retire. I just tend to lean on the safe side, and I think about when I see them 10 years from now and sit down and see their families. I just want them to enjoy life. I want them to enjoy the fruits of the labor and everything they've done in this sport.
And that itch to come back, is it tough? You're in the worst situation possible because you're every week you're on cage side watching fights and calling fights, so you'll get that temptation.
I'd argue it's the best though. For honest to God, it's the same thing. When I had to transition out of the military, it was a really hard transition for me. You need to find a new challenge. If you don't find a new challenge, then the old challenge is still there. You start to think, like, hey, I could still do this. I could still fight again. And it's really difficult. And so my advice to fighters, when they're done, it's like a Band-Aid. You have to just rip it off. Don't pull it off slowly, because the temptation to come back is always there. You've got to find a new challenge to occupy your mind. And for me, I got very lucky. Calling fights, being a professional color analyst, is a very difficult job. And I'm still learning every time I do it. I'm far from perfect. But that new challenge and being able to still be there octagon side connected to the sport, it helps a lot to fight that itch. I would argue it's not the opposite. So I feel for all my fellow fighters, when it's time to call it a day, I would just tell them, find a new challenge. If you don't have it, chances are you're going to try to circle back and do this more.
Yeah, and moving on in the card, in the co-main event, Claudia Gadelha and Karolina Kowalkiewicz, it's a huge fight in the strawweight division. It's an important one. Could maybe get on the next one in line for the belt against Joanna Jędrzejczyk. How do you see this matchup? I mean, 3 rounds is not the best scenario for a fight like this. But how do you see this fight going?
Yeah, it's exactly right. They both have to be thinking strategy for a 3-round fight here. And so the hard part for Karolina does her best work when she can get aggressive, when she can make the fight a little bit ugly, when she's pushing you backwards. When you do that against Claudia, Claudia is very, very good at taking people down. She's also very good at moving her head side to side, getting inside, counter-striking you. She's a totally complete fighter. But she baits ladies so well. She baits them into coming forward and getting easy takedowns. Karolina has to measure her approach. She's got to get low, and I would tell her, punch at the chest of Claudia Gadelha early. Throw low, get your head at her chin level so that when you come forward, you make it much more difficult for her to duck underneath, level changing, get to your hips. And if she can defend the first 2 or 3 takedowns of Claudia, if she can defend those, there's a lot of mind games. Will Claudia shoot again? The most energy-consuming thing in all of mixed martial arts is offensive takedowns. You go for that double leg and you fail, man, you're breathing heavy. So Karolina has to come out high pace, high pace, high pace, low center of gravity, be offensive, force the takedowns, defend them to wear Claudia down. Send her to her corner, her stool after round 1, make her have shot 3 or 4 takedowns, make her tired, make her question wanting to be there. For Claudia, look, it's about pace. You're a complete fighter. There's no rush. She can strike, she can take her down. She has excellent combinations she has excellent takedowns at the end of her combinations, excellent reactive takedowns if you get too aggressive and push forward. So for her, she's got to fight this fight with strategy and realizing that there is a pace. If you want to take the belt from Joanna, you've got to be able to fight with strategy and the right pace, because Joanna can go probably 7 or 8 rounds if she wanted to. And that's why we see Claudia now has moved to a camp where everything's about her. No disrespect to where she was before. She's at a place now where she's got 3 or 4 people that all they think about is her. She hired a new strength conditioning coach who put a lot of science into her training to kind of transform her a little bit and really boost her cardio for a strong, explosive woman. She's motivated, and so is Karolina. Karolina feels a little bit of a chip on her shoulder because she's like, people don't believe she belongs with the elite of the sport. She's mad in this fight, and that's a good place, I think, for Karolina to be.
And Claudia Gadelha's former teammate, Jose Aldo, putting his title on the line against interim champion Max Holloway. Such a fantastic matchup.
Oh, awesome fight.
This is one of the best fights the UFC can make this year.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on this one? Because this is an interesting one, because Max is on a long win streak, and Jose Aldo coming off this great performance against Frankie Edgar in the rematch, defeating him again the way he did, with such dominance. Yeah. What are your thoughts on this one? Is this a tricky one?
Here's the biggest thing to watch, and here's the biggest thing people aren't talking about yet. When you watch Max Holloway's fights and you watch Jose Aldo's fights, Max Holloway will land as many significant strikes in 3 rounds as Jose Aldo does in 5. Max Holloway is a far busier fighter. And I talked about this a little bit in the Assunção Moraes fight. Jose Aldo has to be careful not to get too far behind on the scorecards. Max Holloway's got a good chin. He's a big dude at 145. He's a tough guy to finish. If your game plan is to catch him with the perfect counter and knock him out, you're leaving a lot up to chance. We have to see a busier Jose Aldo. Now, that being said, Jose Aldo was able to beat a high-volume fighter in his last fight against Frankie Edgar, and the way he did that was having a crisp, quick, untelegraphed jab. The thing that Aldo does so well when he moves his feet a little bit, you come forward and you want to get offensive, he stops all of your momentum with that jab. And I've heard a lot of people say, well, Holloway's got a big reach advantage. No, he doesn't. He does not have a reach advantage.
He's taller,
he's taller, but the reach is very similar. And so if Aldo can snap that jab and keep Holloway's combinations at bay and keep the fight here, and then he's got to use his kicks. The last 3 fights for Aldo were Mendes, McGregor, and Frankie Edgar. 2 of those guys, elite level wrestlers. We didn't see barely any kicks. They're phenomenal weapons, and Max Holloway gets very heavy on that lead leg in both his orthodox and his southpaw stance. So those are really the keys for Aldo. He's got to be busier. He's got to control the range of this fight with his jab. If he lets Max Holloway get in and out when he wants and get into a rhythm with his combinations, he is in a lot of trouble, because when Max Holloway gets moving, gets in a rhythm, and gets to reading you, it's unreal how much momentum he builds, and he keeps you guessing. Hits you to the body, legs, head, different stances. I mean, he looks just as good lefty as he does orthodox. And that's really for Max Holloway. Get out there right away. Get your range, get into a rhythm, and be diverse. Don't let him time you. Don't let him get used to you having your left leg forward and time you with leg kicks. Switch it up. Attack him to the body early as well. Max Holloway goes to the body nicely. If I'm fighting Jose Aldo in a 5-round fight, I start working that body early. Round 1, kicks to the body, punches to the body. Beautiful combinations. That's what Max Holloway does. When he gets in that rhythm, man, he is tough to beat. When you look at his sequence that he finished Anthony Pettis with, he found an opening to the body. Once he found it, went right back to it. Combination, bam, kick to the body. He knew he had him hurt. Combination, and every punch as he was throwing to finish the fight was with accuracy. I mean, everything landed there. He's on a totally different level. His confidence is high. So I really feel we're going to see some momentum shifts in this fight. If Holloway comes out and he's in a rhythm right from the go, and he gets in that rhythm, can Jose Aldo respond? Can he counter it? Can he stop that momentum and respond? If Max Holloway comes out and he's slow, and he can't get past the job of Jose Aldo, what does he do in response? And then the last X factor of this fight that really could throw people off, we forget about this. We haven't seen it since Jose Aldo fought Ricardo Lamas. Jose Aldo actually has really good offensive wrestling when he wants to use it. We usually only see the defense. Don't be surprised if Jose Aldo throws us all for a loop and he goes in there with body locks, double legs or single legs, and looks to take down Max Holloway. His jiu-jitsu, his ground stuff is beautiful. The only thing is for Aldo, those offensive takedowns, they cost you energy. So if that's the game plan, can he do that for 5 rounds? Or will he just do it a couple of rounds to win a few rounds and solidify winning those rounds? We'll see. But that's an X factor a lot of people forget about Jose Aldo. He has the offensive wrestling in his repertoire. Will he use it? That's the question.
Yeah, and you had a chance to call Jose Aldo's fights here in Rio against Korean Zombie and Max Holloway's and Chad Mendes as well. And Max Holloway's, a lot of his fights, but the first one of his current win streak, which fighter, looking back, has evolved the most since then?
Max Holloway. I call the start of this 10-fight win streak for Max Holloway started in Singapore when he fought Will Chope. It was the second UFC fight I've ever called. And that Max Holloway, I remember when I talked to him before the fight, he's kind of a nervous guy, still looking to prove himself. He knew how good he could be, but he didn't know how he was going to get there. He's totally different now. I mean, mentally, he is so strong, and then talent-wise and technique-wise, he's evolved so much. And here's the interesting thing. He did it his own way. Most guys, when they're that young and they're looking for the knowledge to get to the next few levels, they go in search of different camps, different gyms. Max Holloway said, no, I'm going to do it here in Hawaii, and I'm going to build it. And he did it. He was homegrown. Hard thing to do. And he's put together an incredible team. I mean, excellent coaches. And you look at, I mean, submits Cub Swanson. Cub Swanson's an excellent grappler. Knocks out Anthony Pettis, and it started with a body kick, what Anthony Pettis usually does to guys. These are world-class, outstanding fighters that he is finishing. His evolution has been unbelievable. That being said, Jose Aldo is one of the best athletes I've ever had the privilege to call his fights. I mean, when you look at different times where people have been able to take him down, his hips touch, he's right back up. The velocity he gets on these kicks, how quick his jab is delivered. He's so fast twitch. He is such a gifted athlete. Will that be the difference in this fight? We see more volume and difference in what Max Holloway does. Jose Aldo does some things, and he does them really well. He doesn't show a lot of variety in his fights, even though he's capable of it. But he's so athletic and so fast, and it makes a big difference.
So Brian, you just got me even more excited about this fight than I was before.
Happy to.
I would like to thank you for joining me on this preview show. You did a fantastic job. Can't wait to watch the fight called by you on Saturday. And to all the fans, thank you for sticking up on MMAfighting.com all week for our coverage. We have more Saturday nights at Geonesse Arena here in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. Stay tuned.